Mount Sinai, or Har Sinai in Hebrew, Oro Sinai in Greek, also known as Mount Horeb and the Mountain of Moses. It's a mountain in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt that is a possible location of the biblical Mount Sinai, considered the holy site by the Abrahamic religions. Mount Sinai mentioned many times in the book of Exodus and other books of the Bible, even in the Quran. According to Jewish, Christian, and Islamic tradition, the biblical Mount Sinai was the place where Moses received the Ten Commandments. Now, there is something very peculiar with the rocks of Mount Sinai. I have seen them myself. I used to have a friend who had one because she had traveled there. Usually people that do go there for pilgrimages are able to pick up some of these rocks. And you notice that even when you split the rock, there are certain types of branches around the edges of the rock that look like dried little tiny ferns. And when you cut the rock in pieces, the ferns come and present themselves on the sides of the rock, no matter how you slice the rock, whether it's a big piece or a tiny or a very small piece. It has special like little branches on it. It's very strange because no matter how you slice the rock, it becomes imprinted with these little branches that look like the bird. They say it looks like the burning bush, and they say that it's. I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know what other geologic explanation there could be for such a rock. But they say that this happened since the time of the burning bush and Moses, who asked God, how would I know when I come back to Mount Sinai where the proper mountain is? And God said, you will know from the rocks. That's a tradition. I don't know. I don't know how that came about, but I just wanted you to know that. This is what these rocks look like. As you can see, they have a design of the burning bush on the sides of it. Now, I had a friend who had one of these things. She had gone to the Mount Sinai for a pilgrimage, and she brought a rock like this. And she told me that other people who had split the rock found that the design of these little branches then formed on the sides of the rock that was split. It's very strange. And they don't know of any other locations on Earth that has a rock like this. It's supposed to symbolize the burning bush on Mount Sinai from the time of the prophet Moses and Exodus. Was Mount Sinai a volcano? Discoveries affecting the interpretation of this location from the Exodus. This is St. Catherine's Monastery, the burning bush that Moses saw and heard the voice of God, saw the bush that was burning but was not consumed. That was, of course, the light of the holy fire, the Holy Spirit, is inside, in the center of the monastery. This is a male monastery right under the mountain, as you can see here. This is by D.K. Hall. He says when he was younger, he spent many hours searching for Sinai Desert, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Northern Arabia. There were caravan routes, he says, wells and springs, primitive Bedouin survival methods to study. He wanted to study them. We know that the Bedouins there are the guards of the monastery as well. When the Prophet Muhammad went to visit this monastery, he told them to be guarding the monastery, and the families of those families are there up to today, from what I've heard, guarding the monastery. That's their apostolate. And inside the center of the in the courtyard of the monastery is the burning bush, where Moses had to take his shoes off. That's where he saw the light that was burning, but the bush was not consumed from the fire. And this is where he heard the voice of God. Now this document says here, there are translations of written records of Egypt in the Hebrew Bible and the cuneiform texts of Mesopotamia, Syria, and Canaan, providing information about early times, at least as early as the Bible. And he said when he was studying to learn theory that Mount Sinai in the book of Exodus was a volcano, he later learned of the existence of volcanoes in northern Arabia, where the ancient region of biblical Maidan may have been located. The Apostle Paul wrote about Mount Sinai being in Arabia in his letter to the Galatians, and more recently, he says I do not look for the root of Exodus, as I think it was probably a story more than a fact, yet I pass on some of my knowledge of volcanoes in the land of Maidan to those who may search for such. Well, we know that a lot of Africa, northern Africa, Iraq, and Iran are full of volcanoes. As a matter of fact, many geologists have scanned Google Earth and have found volcanic, what look like volcanic craters and volcanic lava flows, and have walked to that area and found that yes, it was in fact such a type of activity. And some of these eruptions were quite old. Some of them were 5,000, 3,000 years ago, and they tied that in with the demise of for example, the demise of the Egyptian pharaoh systems. They had famines, they had civil unrest, economic problems. Even Queen Cleopatra wanted to have a very strong alliance with Rome so that Rome could support Egypt. Of course, that didn't work out. But anyway, this here says some of the greener parts of Israel are not far from the desert fringes. As we know, we can see this from Google Earth. Many desert nomads may have desired to enter a land where grain was sown and grown, of fruit and olive trees, providing abundant harvests. And for years before the Bible was written, Egyptian pharaohs campaigned in Canaan and took captives back to Egypt, where they were sold as slaves. There was an Egyptian record of a few captives attempting to escape, yet no records of mass migrations out of Egypt to the north. The Egyptian armies occupied Canaan and set up administrative centers such as the one found at Beth Shean in northern Israel, an Egyptian government's residence at Afek, and an Egyptian fort discovered on the hill in Joppa, Jaffo, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea from the time of Ramesside dynasty. Then Pharaoh Mermet Pa, from 1212 to 1202 BC, reported his army defeated a group of people called Israel, along with the towns of Ashkelon, Gezer, and Yanoam during one of his trips north into Canaan. The record is the first record of Israel's existence, as far as the Egyptian records go. Now, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch and Torah, contain some wisdom and laws that are useful. Israel was not the first nation to make laws. Archaeologists have found that there was increased settlement in the hill country north of Jerusalem after the end of the Bronze Age. That's 1200 BC. As we know, that's the time of King Saul and King David. The settlements were thought to be Jewish, as there were few, if any, pig bones found in these layers, because of course the Hebrews did not eat pork. In the layers of town ruins below these Iron Age 1 ruins, pig bones were found in large numbers. These findings are part of the evidence for early Israeli settlement in the hill country east of the immigrant Sea peoples habitations who were described as the Hebrew Bible as Peleshet or Philistine. In ancient Egyptian documents, Ramesses III as Peleset, and in English Bible translations as Philistine. Whether Israel grew from ideas in the existing population of Canaan or from influx of outsiders is open to speculation. Moses gave laws advising rejection of idol worship, the power of spiritual reform against the ideology that God desired the blood of sacrificed animals came from a religion that emerged from the Jewish religion as Christianity. The evidence of recent volcanic activity in northwestern Arabia will be supported by declassified CIA spy satellite photos, United States Geological Survey expedition reports, and a number of books and journals, articles written about this. Now, there are also biblical quotes concerning the geology of the area. As we know, the Old Testament is full of geologic changes. And even, for example, the 10 plagues of Egypt could have been tied into gas emissions, the fact that reptiles were entering the city, the flies and the gnats and the locusts, swarms, and the ash and the ash, the red tide, the red water, all these can be tied into volcanic activity and seismic activity. Now, the Bible quotes in Deuteronomy 4:11, it's written, "And ye came near and stood under the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire unto the midst of heaven, with darkness, clouds, and the thick darkness. And the Lord spake unto you out of the midst of the fire. Ye heard the voice of the words, but saw no similitude, only ye heard a voice." If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.